welcome back to Whisky Sticks Politics. And today we're talking about the future of our classrooms with a woman who's seen the education system from every possible angle. She spent over a decade in Durham classrooms as a teacher and mentor. She's worked on the front lines of hiring as a staffing coordinator and led the charge for educator rights as president of the DAE and vice president of the NCAE.
Yes.
And we're going to get into what both of those acronyms mean. Now, Governor Cooper has handpicked her as part of his Drive Task Force. And this is to help diversity of our state's teaching force. And today she's building national partnerships as well with as a program manager at the Hunt Institute.
Absolutely.
She's a DPS parent, a lifelong advocate, and she's running for the Durham School Board. And she's going to bring 20 years of experience and use that for real world solutions. So please help me welcome Kristy Moore.
Thank you for having me.
No, I really appreciate you coming in. And I want to first off, thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Absolutely.
A lot of what made me want to sit down and even have a podcast or platform like this was to kind of get more engaged on the local level and know who's representing us at various important positions.
Right.
All right, throughout our society, right? Now, Kristy, you spent years as a mentor in the classroom and as the president of DAE, often leading the charge from outside the boardroom to demand transparency and fair pay. Most notably during the 2024 pay crisis, it shook our district.
It did.
All right, from what I'm understanding. And now that you're running for a seat on that board, and with the DPS facing this, $7 million budget, we'll call it a deficit, but I'm sure you can put that in proper perspective for us. Talk to us about that, and dealing with those people that may have even brought you up in the ranks. That now you're dealing with policy and making decisions, right?
Right. So what I bring to the table that other people may not have the experience of, I've been in the classroom. I'm a parent as well. I had a child who graduated from DPS and a child who was currently in DPS in middle school. Yeah. And I have seen education on the local, state, and national level because I was also on the board of the National Education Association.
Yes, ma'am.
So I understand how all the money is pulled into our district. We don't just have local money that we can do whatever we want to with. We have state money that comes in. We have federal money that comes in. And those monies are earmarked for certain things that we have to use in our school district. That could be staff allotments. That could be facilities, those kind of things. And so when you understand where the money is coming from and those particular monies are earmarked, then you know how to better use that money and how to better maneuver that money within the budget. And then that gives you a better outlook on what we can and cannot do with our money here in Durham Public Schools. Though we are losing money on the state level and, of course, on the federal level, we can't always just depend on our local county commissioners to fill that gap for us because then we have to raise taxes for our Durham residents. And that's not what we want to do. So we have to also lobby our state legislators, which is something that I did. I know how to lobby, how to talk to people who might not necessarily agree with me on some issues,
right.
But I know how to sit down and find that common thread so that we can get them to understand why money has to go into education here in North Carolina.
Right. What do you feel like has been some of the biggest hurdles to accomplish making sure that the budget is used appropriately and making sure everybody, I guess both sides, maybe for lack of a better term, we'll say right. both sides of the aisle to come together and reach those decisions for the greater good of Durham and not raise those taxes?
Right. Well, our county commissioners are fantastic here in Durham. They typically give us what we need to make sure our schools have the resources. So that's not where the problem is. The problem is that we don't have a state budget. We're the only state in North Carolina that does not, in the United States that doesn't have a budget. And so that's where the problem lies. Right. And until we work together with other school boards across North Carolina and go and sit down and fight for them to pass that budget, we're going to continue to have deficits.
Right.
Until we can make sure that they use the education lottery for education, as it's supposed to be done, then we're going to keep being in a deficit. So we have to build coalitions with our parents, our staff, other school boards across North Carolina to ensure that we are all fighting for the right thing.
Yes, ma'am. When people hear the word deficit, sort of the first knee-jerk thought that comes to mind, they may think of like a misappropriation of funds. Right. But this deficit could be due to the fact that we don't have a budget.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
how is that affecting your day-to-day? Or has that had any effect on your day-to-day as far as how you're operating?
Well, it affects my day-to-day because we have a lack of bus drivers, because then that affects me getting to my job every day because I have to make sure that my child gets to school. So then I have to call my job and say, I'm going to be late. So which means I have to work extra after hours to make up that time. And for parents who don't have that luxury of being able to call into their job and say they're going to be late, a child might not make it to school or they're going to be very late. I know that there are EC classrooms whose parents depend on that transportation. Their kids might not be in school for a week because they have no other way to get that child to school. So those are the kind of things that we are suffering here. We can't pay our staff, our classified staff, the wages that we want to pay them here in Durham because we don't have a budget from the state to make sure that money is coming in. So it affects everything. It affects the resources our children get. It affects the technology we're able to give our children in the classroom. It affects what we can do for our educators in the classroom. It affects every single part of our students' lives.
Right. So we need to get a budget.
We need a budget.
We need a budget passed. It definitely sounds like that. Now, if I could, let's talk a little bit about the District 4 race, okay? It's a very competitive three-way race right now, and no one is an incumbent, so that means it's wide open. Right? Now, your opponent, Xavier, Mr. Casey, he has all the major local endorsements, DAE, People's Alliance, and, you know, with you being a former DAE president, talk to us about, like, you know, why would Durham vote for you as opposed to Mr. Xavier?
Absolutely. Well, the one thing that I can say is because I have no alliance with anyone, then that means I'm going to look at the data and make sure that we're making right decisions for our children and not based off of politics.
Right.
And so that is the biggest thing that I put out there. I believe that's one reason I did not get the endorsements because they know that I'm going to look at the information. I'm going to make critical decisions based off of what our students and our staff need and our parents need in our schools and not based off of politics. I'm not here to be a politician. I'm here to do the right thing for Durham Public Schools, period.
I love it. Now, understanding that, and then let's see, was it Jerome?
Yeah.
You know, that he's also a part of this race, and everybody seems to just have a wealth of experience. Now, part of your campaign, you've talked about transparency.
Absolutely.
Tell us, like, make this position transparent for our listeners today. Tell us, what would your role be if they voted for you? What's happening day one?
Day one, after March 3rd, March 4th.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll be honest, I'm going to take a nap. I'm going to get some rest. So let's be honest about that.
Right.
But I want to be in the community. This is what I've done this whole campaign. I've talked to people. I've listened to people. I want to understand, what does our community need from our public schools? Those conversations are not happening. I want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly. I want to really know what's going on. I want to talk to parents who have left DPS. Why did you choose to put your child in a charter or private school? Help me understand so we can make DPS the greatest choice there is here in Durham. Until we begin having those conversations and those healing conversations from when, you know, they felt like they can't trust Durham because of things that have happened in the past with the classified workers and the money not being there. Right. Maybe they feel like their children aren't safe in our schools. We need to begin those healing conversations. And that has to happen day one. We can't wait till we get sworn in into that office to begin to build those bridges. And we have to build those bridges.
Right. Now you've got, you know, over 20 years of experience and being a lifelong advocate for our students. And you brought up something that's really important right now when they talk about safety.
Absolutely.
Right. It's, you know, even, you know, we'll put local crime aside. You know, let's talk about, like, you know, those children from diverse communities, right?
Absolutely.
And dealing with ICE, right? And we know that is, you know, that's been on the news, on the forefront of everybody's mind. What are some of the policies that you be an advocate for that's going to help keep our Durham kids safe that might be subject to that? Right.
Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to sit down with the sheriff's office and the police office.
Yes, ma'am.
Police officers to understand what can ICE do and cannot do. Where can they go, where they cannot go? We need to understand that so we can begin to create a strategic plan about how to make sure our students are safe. We need to meet with our Latino community to understand what can we do to help you feel safe? Because we're not having those conversations with the people who are affected by this, and who are living this terror each and every day. And so if we don't understand how to keep our children safe and what our families need from us, we can't have a strategic plan of how to keep our kids safe. I can't see asking a teacher to get in the way of an ICE officer and a child. We would, don't get it twisted. We would do it because we have.
We don't want to call y'all for that though.
Exactly. And we don't want anyone to get harmed. Exactly. That's why we have sheriff and that's why we have the police, and we need to make sure that we're engaging them to understand what's going on. Many of our schools have SRO officers. What is their place in this, and how can they ensure that our children stay safe? So we have to have those conversations. Here in Durham, we have so many rich resources that we do not tap into, that we have to begin to tap into. And that's the start.
Right. What are some of those resources that, or some places you feel like we can tap into?
Absolutely.
That you might already have on your radar?
Absolutely. Small businesses.
Right.
There are so many small businesses here in Durham. We have major corporations here in this area. We have universities in this area. We're not having conversations about how they can come into our schools and help with resources, help with some things, tutoring, those kind of things that we don't have to pay for.
Right.
You know, we have corporations have funds that they can give to us to ensure that we can get some resources into our classrooms. We can get volunteers from some of our universities for translation for our parents coming into our schools.
Yep.
So we have so many resources. We just have to sit down again, like we're doing right here, and having a conversation. If Durham would stop being in silos, then we can really move some amazing things here in Durham for our children and our community.
There are a lot of big companies that get tax write-offs when they do things for the community.
Absolutely.
As well. Whereas it could be like a mentorship program. And even speaking of being like a mentor for yourself in the classroom, can you tell us a little bit about transitioning from, hey, working in the classroom, but now you're president of DAE, running for the head of the school board. Talk to us about being on both sides of that and why you would be a perfect fit for this.
Absolutely. Because I can see policy in a different way than no one else can see it that's running for this race. So I can see it from a parent perspective. I can see it from a union president's perspective. I can see it from an educator's perspective. I can see it from a policymaker's perspective, because I work with policymakers right now in my job that I have now on how to create great policy for education that's going to be positive. So I have all those lenses that I can look through to understand, is this policy going to negatively affect a family, or is it going to positively affect their family? Now that we looked at that lens, how's it going to affect our educators in the classroom? Can they truly teach what we're asking them to teach? Can they truly implement this policy with fidelity if we do it this way? Now that we looked at it that way, how are we going to make sure that we have the funds to back up this policy, that we're paying for the resources that we're now asking our educators to do and our parents to be behind? And then are we having conversations with our community? Do we talk to our educators and our parents about this policy that's going to affect them? So when you look at it in all those ways, you get buy-in, and you make sure that everybody understands what's coming down the pipeline. And that also goes back to transparency.
And we appreciate you being transparent about that. And from one of the things that I researched about you, that you were a staffing coordinator, all right, in Chapel Hill. And I believe part of your bio or something that I read is that you don't want teachers leaving Durham.
Absolutely.
All right. So with you having that experience with staffing, what are some things that you can do to make sure that our teachers that are dedicated to our students here in the Bull City stay here in the Bull City?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing, of course, we always want to say pay, but we also know what our financial health looks like right now, because we don't have a state budget, right? So what does our school environment look like? We need to do a research to really look and see what schools are losing educators at high rates. And then we need to look at the administration to see, why are we losing educators at a high rate at this particular school? Educators want to feel respected, and we want to feel belonging in our schools. When you do those two things, they will typically stay. Educators, we knew where we were getting into when we took these jobs. We honestly did. Now, do we deserve higher pay? Yes. Do we want higher pay? Yes. But if you go into, you're already not making the money you want to make, you're already not, being respected as far as that's concerned, but you can respect me in my classroom. You can respect me as I walk through the hall and we have conversations. You can make sure that I feel part of the culture in your school. That makes a lot of difference. Just having that, I can walk into a school, within 10 minutes, I can tell you how educators feel in that school.
Oh, wow.
Because you can feel the environment. Are they walking around? Good morning, how are you? So glad you're here. You can feel it. And we have to do more of that and be in our schools to understand those cultures.
No, that's very interesting. Has that been some of the responses that you've gotten so far with your conversations with current educators, feeling like they need to belong? What are some of the, are there any stories that you might be able to share that have been shared with you that's led to some of these circumstances?
Not really any particular stories. They just want to feel respected and feel part of the community. I know when I worked in Chapel Hill, we would have people come to Chapel Hill because they think they could, well, they don't think, they did make a little bit more money. Not a lot, a little bit.
Right.
But they would leave within 6 months because they didn't feel respected within their school building. And then they would come back to Durham or they would go to Orange County. And just understanding that, it takes very little to feel respected. And just having that acknowledgement of I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're doing the best you can. And I'm here to help you. Offering that help when educators need help. Simple as allowing them to go to the restroom throughout the day. As an administrator, are you checking on your educators to see if they just need a 5-minute break? Especially, I taught elementary school. We're with those babies all day long. So sometimes you just need a woo-sawa moment, as we would say, just to get yourself together.
Right.
Because it can, as you know, it can be a lot. Because we're not just educators. Sometimes we're mommies, we're daddies, we're psychologists, we're social workers. There's so much in that. And our kids, and our kids come to school with so much. And so we have to be that all for them, and that weighs on us.
I think we need to reinstitute the nap.
Yes. I taught preschool. Nap time was amazing.
I think we need another nap. If we can work out putting the nap back into the regular work day,
Right.
I think we'd all be
happier.
I appreciate you sharing that laugh with me. Now, understanding as well part of your bio, serving as a union president, right? You served as president of the Durham Association of Educators, that's the DAE.
Yes.
And you also were the vice president of the North Carolina Association of Educators.
Yes.
So how do you transition from being the person advocating to the board to being the person on the board who has to balance all of those demands and with the budget and personalities, right? And we know typically as you go up, it's budget and personalities that you're working with, right?
Right. Well, I think it's a very easy transition, quite honestly. You're still advocating.
Absolutely.
You're still advocating for what's right. You're still looking at the budget and making sure that the budget is being spent correctly and transparently, because that's all we asked for when I was president.
Yes.
We want to make sure that we understand what's going on and where the money's going and why it's going here. So it doesn't change anything. It just flips the switch a little bit. Okay. And so it gives, quite honestly, it gives educators a little bit more voice, because I've been there, I've done that, I know what it's like. And so having someone on the board that's done this and understands it, it gives educators a little higher voice. And also our students, because everything is student-centered that we do. Even when I was union president, they're union for teachers, but teachers are in it for the students.
Absolutely.
And so we have to always keep that as a lens. Yes, we want to fight for what educators need in the classroom and the pay and the resources. But what does all that do? It positively affects our students at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So flipping that switch, understanding that, there has to be that space made for current educators to be able to voice their opinions, right?
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I've been able to research, trying to get prepared for you today, meet and confer.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. And from my understanding, meet and confer, this is a process that was set up in good faith where educators can, petition the board, kind of bring their concerns.
Absolutely.
What am I missing from understanding about meet and confer?
You're not missing anything. That's exactly right. It's a way for administration and educators to sit down and have a critical conversation about what is needed in the classroom.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And is that a position that you advocate for?
Absolutely. Now, do I think it needs to be tweaked a little bit? Yes. But I do think that educators deserve and should have a space where they can talk to administrators to help them understand what's really going on in the classroom. Because superintendent can't be in every class all day, every day. So he needs to understand, and his administration needs to understand what's really going on in the classrooms and what educators need. And which, again, in turn, is what our students need to have as well.
Right. And honestly, understanding more about that, I believe recently we got an incident at a board meeting that came up and I believe it was Superintendent Lewis recently called out DAE leadership for their lack of respect during those meetings. Now, given your history leading that same group, who needs to be more flexible here? Is it the board or?
Right. I don't think anyone needs to be more flexible. When disrespect happens, it needs to be acknowledged and it needs to be healed.
Yeah.
The end of discussion as far as that's concerned. Have a conversation with the person that you offended so that the healing process can begin. When you are all pushing for the same thing, and that is what's right for students and educators, there's sometimes going to be heated conversations because you're saying basically the same thing just in different ways. And so when I say it needs to be tweaked a little bit, I think there needs to be a mediator in the room. So that when tensions get high, the mediator can take a moment, tell everyone to pause and understand, okay, it's getting a little tension in the room. Let's take a 5-minute break and come back. Or when we need to stay on time, the mediator does that. And it's not the onus of one person over the other to ensure that the time limits are kept that are agreed to. So Meet Confer is a great thing. I'm very proud that DAE was able to make that happen. And I'm also think that's something that we need to continue. But again, there needs to be some criteria with that to ensure that everyone is heard and it's a fair process.
Well, thank you for, speaking to that topic. I don't know a whole lot about the situation, but as I was learning, I know respect is something that everybody can understand.
Absolutely.
Whether you're on that board or you're dealing with, a job at Burger King, people deal with microaggressions at work,
Absolutely.
all the time in different facets. But that'll be another topic for another day, right? But speaking to you about understanding the board and knowing that you serve as a program manager of national programs. Now, on a planning scale that large and building those partnerships, how do you see, how are you seeing things from a national lens that you feel like that you can bring to us here in Durham?
Absolutely. So when you see what's going on the national level, you will understand what's going to matriculate down to Durham eventually. Okay. So you can begin to prepare for that.
Okay.
For instance, we did not prepare for the ICE invasion. Well, we should have. We saw it coming. So we should have been proactive with that. So understanding what funding may or may not be taken away. And when we understand that and we hear that for the first time, now it's time to start planning. Don't wait for it to hit us. Go ahead and plan for that now because more than likely it's coming this way. So anything that starts hitting some other states, it always is going to matriculate down. And so we need to be prepared for that. So that's what gives me a different lens because I can see, okay, somewhere in the United States, this is happening. Durham, what are we going to do? Because it's going to be us next.
And that's a very valid point that you bring up. I don't know if anybody sort of expected, what they got from ICE.
Absolutely.
But you're right. If, being as proactive as possible,
Absolutely.
That's always going to be preferred.
Right. Exactly. You plan ahead for anything that could come. And hopefully it doesn't come. But if it does, then you have a plan in place.
Now with Ms. Linda McMahon being appointed, by with our current administration in office, they've made a lot of changes, right, on the federal level. What are some things that we can do or proactive steps we can take to help shield our children in Durham for some of that's coming down at the federal level?
Absolutely. It goes back to making sure that we're building coalitions here in Durham. In Durham, what I've noticed through this election process, we have a lot of pockets of fantastic people advocating all over Durham. Amazing work. But what if we all got on the same page and moved this massive ship in the same direction? And what we can make a huge difference, especially for things coming down from a federal level. So if we know something's coming down, we meet with all those advocacy groups, have conversations, and how can you help us move this and shield our children to ensure that nothing's going to affect them in a negative way. And begin to talk to those businesses. How can you help us make sure that our children are getting the resources? What money do you have? Corporate America has millions and billions of dollars.
Right.
So how do we tap into that? How do we use, because they're about to take corporate taxes away from these corporations. So now what are we going to do? We have to start having these conversations now so they know that Durham children are important and that we need those resources.
Right. Start to try to appeal to that better nature, maybe, right?
Absolutely.
So, because they're people, they're human, and maybe that with that windfall, they're looking for opportunities to redirect those funds.
Absolutely.
So being in position to say, hey, we have this great cause, our children here in Durham.
Absolutely.
Right.
And their employees and children go to our schools. So if we can't get their employees' child to school because we don't have school buses and people to drive those school buses, now they're going to be late. Your productivity is down because they're not there.
Right.
So how are you going to help us fix this problem?
That's the connection.
Absolutely.
That's the connection. And making other connections with you being from the Drive Task Force, right? You were appointed by the governor,
Yes.
right? And with you being on that task force, is there anything concrete that you were able to discover that you'll be able to implement day one?
Right. So just want to let everybody know I'm not on that task force anymore.
Oh.
I was on it years ago, but I will say what we did learn is that our pipeline is broken to educators. We have, especially our educators of color, we're not getting them to go into education. Our children of color are not going into education. And so the pipeline that we have is broken. And so what we have to do is create a better pipeline.
Right.
We need to have teacher cadet programs in our high schools. I know Forsyth County has done it for many years. So I grew up in Forsyth County, has done it for many years. And many times, once those children go off to college, they come back and then teach in Forsyth County because they see the value. And then Forsyth County helped grow them.
Right.
So they want to go back to what grew them, right?
For sure.
And then if we can work with some of these corporations, some of these businesses, and get some fund to get some scholarship money in there to help send our kids to college, to get education degrees, work with our school educations across North Carolina to go in and have conversations. I know when I was a mentor, we went to North Carolina Central University and did classroom management training for them. And so then they would want to come work for us in Durham Public Schools because they saw our faces. They knew when they got out of school, we were going to be their mentors. So it helped with that line. So again, we got to think outside the box. We have to be strategic. We have to do things different than what has done in years past. Many years ago, people were knocking down doors to get into school systems. That's not the case anymore. The pipeline is completely broken. So how are we going to fix that pipeline? We have to be the plumbers and fix it. We just do.
I love it. I love that analogy that you use because one question that I love to ask, especially when I'm dealing with, someone so accomplished in that field, the breadcrumbs that we're leaving behind.
Right.
That's that story, Hansel and Gretel. We're not leading them to danger, but we're leading them to a career.
Exactly.
What sort of breadcrumbs did you feel like that you've been able to leave behind? Or would you recommend for any of our listeners that may say, you know what, one day I want to be like her?
Well, thank you. Well, I would say when I was a mentor, I worked a lot, of course, with the teachers within the first 3 years of teaching.
Yes, ma'am.
And then I left and went to Chapel Hill and then went to the Hunt Institute. I follow a lot of my mentees on Facebook, and I see a number of them have gone on to work in district offices with working for curriculum coordinators to assistant principals to principals, and I just burst with pride to think I had something to do with that, just to keep them on the track and keep them in education because some of them got to the point, I don't think this is for me. I don't want to be here. Yes, you do. You're amazing. Let me tell you how you're amazing. Let me tell you the difference you're making in these kids' lives and why they need you here. And so just to be able to have those conversations and help an educator understand, yes, it's hard, but it's amazing. And you're making a huge difference. And to see them where they are now, it just makes me just actually want to cry a little bit, but just to bust with pride because I know this is the greatness in Durham. And as long as we continue to do that and push our educators to greatness and support them in that, there's no stopping us here in Durham.
And no stopping us. Definitely no stopping us, right? Well, if I'm thinking about, that deficit and hey, how do we move past that? What's some of the things that we should be looking into from our current leadership to hold them accountable? And how do we hold you accountable if elected?
Absolutely. Hold me accountable. Call me. Email me. I'm not afraid to have critical conversations. I'm not afraid to meet somebody for a cup of coffee or at the end of the day, a glass of wine, because we have to have conversations. And that's how we get past any fears, any harms, those kind of things. So hold me accountable by having a conversation. Hold this administration accountable by asking those critical questions. You know, where's the money going? What are we doing? How are we making sure our students have what they need in the classroom? How do we make sure our educators feel respected and wanted in this district, even though we can't pay them what we want to pay them and need to pay them, and we know that. Right. But are we honest about that? Are we having clear conversations with everyone? Here is the money. There's the money we have to spend this way. And this is why we can't do what we want to do for our education. And so again, we have to have somebody on the board that's going to ask those tough questions and not be afraid of that.
It sounds like it's something, a recurring theme. I feel like it's messaging.
Absolutely.
I feel like on a national level, messaging has been poor. And I think for you, even on the local level, if you message that appropriately,
absolutely,
Durham is going to receive that.
Absolutely.
Durham's going to be able to follow it. I think it just comes down to someone taking the time to be able to put it in a manner digestible to everyone.
Exactly.
You may have heard of Joe Madison, the Black Eagle. You know, he used to say all the time, "Put it where the ghost can get it."
Right.
Right. And you know, and that's somebody that I look up to a lot. He always asks, what are you gonna do about it? And so that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to sit here and I want to talk to people like you, Miss Kristy, to give us a deeper look into how you're representing Durham. Absolutely. And some of the things that might be coming down to us. Now, I've had a chance to sit here and talk to you, but the point of this is to get your message out to Durham. If you look into the camera and you're talking to those people, that's obviously early voting ends tomorrow. Today. Early it's today, 3:00. But if you hadn't voted and you're planning on voting on election day, let them know why they need to vote for you and how they can follow you and find any information. Absolutely.
Well, come see me at the polls. Even if you've already voted, come have a conversation with me. I'm happy to have a conversation. Vote Kristy Moore for District 4 School Board because I see education from all sides, all lenses. I know how to make a difference. I know how to have the critical conversations. I know that I'm not afraid to have those critical conversations and ask the tough questions and be held accountable for what goes on here in Durham Public Schools. So I do hope you'll come out and have a conversation with me. Check out my website and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much. Whisky Sticks Politics audience. We appreciate y'all for coming out and God bless you. Good night.
Whisky, Sticks, and Politics with Rashad Sullivan.